I used to believe silence was peace. That if I stayed quiet long enough, the storms around me would eventually calm. But I was wrong. Silence doesn't stop storms, it feeds them. It gives them room to grow, to rage, to destroy everything you ever thought was safe. My name is Lena Carter, and this is the story of how my silence became my family's worst nightmare. I grew up in a quiet town just outside of Boston, neat houses, perfect lawns, polite smiles that hid too many secrets. My family was one of those you'd look at and think, they've got it all. And we did, at least from the outside. My father, Richard Carter, was a respected lawyer. My mother, Diana, was the kind of woman who never left the house without her pearls. And then there was me, the quiet one. The daughter who always stayed in the background. People used to say I got my calmness from my mother. But what they didn't know was that my calmness wasn't peace, it was fear. I learned early that in our house, words had consequences. If you said the wrong thing, if you questioned too much, if you showed a crack in the perfect image, you became the problem. So, I learned to be silent. To smile when I was supposed to. To nod, even when every part of me screamed no. It wasn't always like that, though. When I was little, my father would lift me up on his shoulders, call me his little miracle. I used to believe him. But love, in our family, came with conditions. When I turned 16, the love started fading. The warmth turned to tension. The smiles turned to silence. It began subtly, closed doors, whispered phone calls, the smell of expensive perfume that wasn't my mother's. I saw it. I noticed it all. But I said nothing. Because that's what I was trained to do, stay quiet. There was one night I'll never forget. It was raining hard, thunder echoing through the walls. I came downstairs to get some water and heard voices, low, sharp, angry. My mother's tone was trembling, almost breaking. "How long, Richard? How long have you been lying to me?" I froze at the staircase. I shouldn't have listened, but something in me wouldn't move. My father's voice came next, cold, dismissive. "You always overreact. Don't start drama again." That word, drama, he used it like a weapon. I remember her sobbing quietly after he walked out. I wanted to go to her. I wanted to say something. But instead, I walked back to my room, closed the door, and said nothing. That was the first night my silence betrayed her. Days turned into months. My father started coming home late. My mother stopped asking where he was. And I just became invisible. At school, I pretended everything was fine. I was the quiet girl, polite, good grades, never a problem. Teachers loved me for being easy. Friends admired me for being chill. But if only they knew that my silence wasn't serenity, it was a shield. Then one day, the shield cracked. It was a Sunday morning. My father was reading the newspaper, my mother was making coffee. I came down the stairs and felt the tension before anyone spoke. My mother placed a cup in front of him, and he didn't even look up. Her voice trembled as she said, "We need to talk about the woman who keeps calling." The newspaper rustled. He looked at her, calm, unbothered, and said, "You're imagining things again." I felt the air in the room freeze. That's when my mother turned to me. Her eyes, red, desperate, met mine. "Lena, you've seen it too, haven't you?" I froze. That was the moment I could have spoken. That was the moment I could have stood beside her, told the truth. But fear held my tongue. I looked away. My mother's expression shattered. And that silence, my silence, broke something inside her that day. 4 days after, she barely spoke. She'd sit by the window, staring out at the grey sky. My father, on the other hand, acted like nothing happened. Then one afternoon, she disappeared for a few hours. When she came back, her face was pale, eyes swollen from crying. She didn't say where she went. But I found out soon enough. That night, she placed a small envelope in my hand and whispered, "If something ever happens to me, promise me you'll keep this safe." Her hands were trembling. Inside the envelope was a USB drive, nothing else. I didn't ask questions. Because, once again, I stayed silent. If only I knew that envelope was the beginning of everything. If only I knew that silence would one day destroy the entire Carter family. Soft pause, reflective tone. Sometimes I wonder, if I had spoken that day, would things have been different? Would my mother still be alive? Would my father have gotten away with everything he hid? But life doesn't wait for your courage. And by the time I finally found mine, it was too late. They say every family has secrets. But in mine, secrets weren't whispers, they were traditions. Passed down, protected, wrapped in ribbons of lies. After that night, the night my mother gave me the envelope, something inside her changed. She smiled less, spoke less, existed less. And yet, somehow, we still played our parts. Every Sunday, the Carters attended church. We'd walk through the doors as if we were the very definition of grace, my father, polished and respected, my mother, perfectly composed, me, the silent daughter who smiled on cue. People would whisper things like, "What a lovely family. Such a sweet girl, so well behaved." And I would nod, smile politely, all while thinking, if only you knew. At home, though, things were different. My father's charm faded behind closed doors. He became distant, easily irritated, always glued to his phone. Sometimes I'd catch him stepping outside late at night, whispering into his Bluetooth earpiece. His tone, soft, careful, wasn't the voice of a husband. One night, curiosity burned stronger than fear. I crept to the window and listened. "No, she doesn't know anything," he said. "I told you, I'll handle it." Handle what? Who was he talking about? I wanted to ask, but silence had become my comfort zone. My mother, meanwhile, was shrinking. She'd lost weight, lost sleep, lost herself. I started finding wine bottles hidden behind the laundry detergent. Her perfume, once her signature, now smelled like desperation and regret. But she never mentioned the envelope again. It stayed hidden, in the back of my closet, like a ticking bomb waiting for someone to find it. One afternoon, about 3 weeks later, we hosted a small dinner party. My father loved those chances to prove how perfect we were. The guests were his law firm partners, their wives, and a few neighbors. My mother put on her best dress, pale blue silk, but I could tell she hated it. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. Dinner was fake laughter, polite compliments, and a room full of egos pretending to be friends. Until one of the guests, Melissa, a woman with too much wine and too few boundaries, leaned across the table and said, "Richard, I saw you at the Monarch Hotel last week. What a coincidence. I didn't know you were staying there." The table went silent. My mother's hand froze midair. My father didn't even flinch. He just smiled and said, "Business trip. You know how it is." The conversation moved on. The laughter returned. But my mother's face stayed frozen, pale as the linen napkin in her hand. That night, she didn't sleep. Neither did I. The next morning, she packed a small suitcase. "I'm visiting my sister for a few days," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes, they were haunted. My father didn't stop her. He just muttered, "Maybe a break will help you think clearly." And she left. For 3 days, I didn't hear from her. Calls went unanswered. Messages unread. On the 4th day, I found her car parked a few miles from our house, near a cliff overlooking the sea. But she wasn't there. Police said it looked like she'd gone for a walk and slipped. An accident. That word, accident, felt like a dagger dressed in silk. Because I knew my mother didn't just slip. She was careful. Always. Something wasn't right. But again. I said nothing. The house felt colder after she was gone. My father barely spoke about her. No tears, no guilt, no regret. He returned to work 2 days later, as if she had never existed. One night, I walked past his study and saw him smiling at his phone. A soft, warm smile, the kind he hadn't given my mother in years. And that's when it hit me, the woman he'd been talking to, the one who called late at night, the one at the Monarch Hotel. She wasn't just a secret. She was the reason my mother was gone. Days turned into weeks. People stopped asking questions. The police closed the case. But I couldn't move on. I started replaying every moment in my head, my mother's trembling hands, her warning, that envelope. The USB. It was time to know the truth. That night, when my father left for another business dinner, I took the envelope out from my closet. My hands shook as I plugged the USB into my laptop. There were 3 video files. Each labeled with a date. The first one, March 12th. I pressed play. The screen flickered, and there was my father, in his office. He wasn't alone. A woman sat across from him, dark hair, sharp smile. She leaned close, whispering something, and he laughed. The camera angle shifted, a hidden recording. My mother must have placed it there. The second video showed him handing over what looked like confidential case files, documents with his firm's letterhead. The woman smiled and slid a check across the desk. It wasn't just an affair. It was betrayal, professional, moral, personal. My father wasn't just cheating on my mother. He was selling secrets. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My chest tightened. Everything I knew about him, every memory, every fake smile, shattered. The third video was shorter. My mother's voice came through, trembling but steady. If you're watching this, Lena, it means the truth came too late. But promise me, you won't let him bury it. And then it ended. I sat there in silence, the kind that doesn't calm you, but burns you from the inside. The kind that demands a choice. That night, I stopped being the quiet daughter. That night, silence became my weapon. The night I watched those videos, I didn't sleep. I sat there staring at the black screen long, after it ended, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat echoing in the dark. I felt hollow. Like the world I'd known had quietly collapsed, and no one else even noticed. I thought about all those years my father called me his pride, how he'd tell people, Lena's just like me. The thought made me sick. Because now I knew exactly what kind of man he really was. A liar. A traitor. And the reason my mother was gone. The next morning, I looked at him differently. He sat at the breakfast table, scrolling through his phone, sipping his coffee, pretending to be the picture of control. "Morning, sweetheart," he said without looking up. I forced a smile. "Morning, Dad." The same old script. The same fake warmth. But beneath my calm tone, something dark had started to wake up. He had no idea that I knew everything. That I had his entire betrayal sitting on a flash drive inside my pocket. For weeks, I watched him closely, like a stranger in my own home. He still left every evening for his so-called meetings. Sometimes, I'd follow him. I'd park my car a block away and just watch. And almost every time, I'd see him meet her, the woman from the video. She was younger, confident, and dangerously comfortable in the role she'd stolen. Her name, I later learned, was Camilla Rowe, a PR consultant who worked with my father's firm. But what she really was poison. I began collecting evidence, screenshots, phone records, even hotel logs. Every detail. Every lie. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized, this wasn't just about an affair. It was about money, power, and corruption. My father had been leaking confidential client information in exchange for money. Camilla wasn't just his lover, she was his partner in crime. And my mother had found out. That's why she'd been silenced. One night, while he was out, I searched his office. His desk was neat, too neat. But behind a row of law books, I found a hidden compartment. Inside was a small black notebook. Every page was filled with transactions, dates, initials, and coded entries. It wasn't hard to decode once I noticed the pattern. Each entry matched the dates on the USB videos. He had been careful, but not careful enough. The final entry stopped just 3 days before my mother's accident. That was all the confirmation I needed. I sat on the floor of his office for hours that night, staring at that notebook. The weight of it, the lies, the betrayal, pressed down on me until I couldn't breathe. And that's when I realized something chilling. My mother had trusted me to carry the truth. And I had. But carrying truth wasn't enough anymore. It was time to use it. Over the next few days, I started planning. At first, I didn't even know what revenge looked like. I didn't want blood or violence, I wanted exposure. I wanted him to feel the slow, public collapse of the perfect life he'd built on lies. So, I started small. I created a fake email account, under a name he wouldn't recognize. Then, I sent an anonymous tip to a local investigative journalist. I attached a few of the documents I'd found, enough to raise questions, not enough to point back to me. Within a week, the news broke. High-profile lawyer under suspicion for insider leaks. His firm went into crisis mode. Phones buzzed all night. Reporters hovered near the office. At dinner, he looked unsettled for the first time. "It's just rumors," he said, forcing a laugh. "Someone's trying to smear me." I nodded, pretending to believe him. Inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. But the thing about revenge is that it never stops where you plan. Once it starts, it spreads. A week later, I got a message from the journalist. He wanted to meet, said the documents were only the tip of something much bigger. I agreed, but under one condition: anonymity. We met in a cafe near the harbor. He was older, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who could sense fear and respect silence. "You're sitting on something explosive," he told me. "But if we go public, you'll need to be ready for the fallout." Fallout. That word stuck in my mind. I didn't just want fallout, I wanted detonation. "Just tell the truth," I said quietly. "Everything. Don't hold back." By the next week, the story hit the national news. My father's name, his firm, even Camilla's, everywhere. Photos, statements, speculation. He tried to act composed. He called it defamation, blamed jealous rivals. But his voice cracked when the FBI showed up at his office. I watched from the living room window as agents led him out in handcuffs. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Cameras flashed. And for the first time, I saw the mask fall from his face. The man who once controlled everything now looked small, fragile, exposed. And yet, I didn't feel peace. Not yet. Because he wasn't the only one who needed to face justice. Camilla was still out there, quiet, untouched, and smug. And I wasn't done with her. That night, as I sat by my mother's old dressing table, I saw her photo, smiling, gentle, kind. I whispered, "I'm not finished yet, Mom. But I will be soon." I wasn't the silent daughter anymore. I was the storm my father never saw coming. At dinner, he looked unsettled for the first time. It's just rumors, he said, forcing a laugh. Someone's trying to smear me. I nodded, pretending to believe him. Inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. But the thing about revenge is that it never stops where you plan. Once it starts, it spreads. A week later, I got a message from the journalist. He wanted to meet, said the documents were only the tip of something much bigger. I agreed, but under one condition: anonymity. We met in a cafe near the harbor. He was older, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who could sense fear and respect silence. "You're sitting on something explosive," he told me. "But if we go public, you'll need to be ready for the fallout." Fallout. That word stuck in my mind. I didn't just want fallout, I wanted detonation. "Just tell the truth," I said quietly. "Everything. Don't hold back." By the next week, the story hit the national news. My father's name, his firm, even Camilla's, everywhere. Photos, statements, speculation. He tried to act composed. He called it defamation, blamed jealous rivals. But his voice cracked when the FBI showed up at his office. I watched from the living room window as agents led him out in handcuffs. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Cameras flashed. And for the first time, I saw the mask fall from his face. The man who once controlled everything now looked small, fragile, exposed. And yet, I didn't feel peace. Not yet. Because he wasn't the only one who needed to face justice. Camilla was still out there, quiet, untouched, and smug. And I wasn't done with her. That night, as I sat by my mother's old dressing table, I saw her photo, smiling, gentle, kind. I whispered, "I'm not finished yet, Mom. But I will be soon." I wasn't the silent daughter anymore. I was the storm my father never saw coming. The morning after my father's arrest felt unreal. It wasn't chaos outside that shook me, it was the silence inside the house. A silence so thick it felt alive. Reporters crowded the street, microphones like weapons. Neighbors whispered as they walked their dogs, pretending not to stare. The Carter name, once respected, envied, now lived on every headline, every gossip feed. And me? I just watched it all unfold, with a calm I didn't recognize. My father spent 2 nights in custody before making bail. When he came home, he looked different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by exhaustion and something I hadn't seen in years: fear. He walked past me without a word, straight into his study, shutting the door behind him. I stood there for a moment, almost waiting for him to yell, to demand, to threaten. But he didn't. For the first time in my life, he had no control left to swing. That should have been enough. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. He wasn't sorry, he was scared. And there's a difference between fear and guilt. Later that night, I heard him on the phone. His voice was low, desperate. "Camilla, they took everything. The files, the accounts, I need your help. We have to fix this." He paused. "Don't you dare walk away now. I've done everything for you." I could hear the edge in his tone, the same one he used to control my mother. But then came her reply, cold, sharp, final. "You're on your own, Richard. I warned you. I'm not going down with you." And just like that, she hung up. The sound of the phone slamming down echoed through the hallway. Then came silence again, that suffocating silence. Except this time, it was his. Over the next few days, his world collapsed piece by piece. His firm suspended him. His reputation disintegrated online, clients cut ties, friends vanished. I'd walk past his study and find him sitting there in the dark, staring at nothing. Once, he looked up at me and said quietly, "You don't believe all those lies, do you, Lena?" For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered my mother, her trembling hands, her last words, her fall. And I realized something important: he wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for an audience. And I refused to give him one. A week later, the journalist called again. The story had exploded nationwide. But he discovered something new: offshore accounts, illegal transfers, fake charities used to move money. And all trails led to one person who had helped him cover it up: Camilla Rowe. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was conspiracy. The journalist asked if I wanted to stay involved or step back now that the authorities had taken over. I said I was done. But I wasn't. Because there was one more truth to uncover, one more lie to expose. That night, I went through my father's things again. In the bottom drawer, I found an old phone, cracked screen, no SIM. I turned it on. There were only a few saved messages. Most were from Camilla. But one, dated 2 days before my mother's accident, made my blood run cold. If she talks, we are finished. Handle it before it gets messy. I stared at the screen, reading that line over and over. It wasn't vague. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a warning. And my father had obeyed. I remember gripping the phone so tightly that my fingers ached. My heart pounded, my breath quickened, and suddenly the walls of the house felt too small to contain what I was feeling. Rage, grief, regret. All mixed into something electric and dangerous. I whispered to myself. You didn't just take her life, you erased her voice. But not anymore. That night, I packed a small bag, took my laptop, the USB, and the phone, and drove out into the city. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay in that house anymore. Not with his lies breathing through the walls. I checked into a small motel on the edge of town. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. News outlets were blasting new headlines. Leaked evidence confirms insider corruption, suspicious death. Lawyer's mistress involved in blackmail scandal. Camilla's name was everywhere. Her face, once polished, now pale and cornered. She released a statement denying everything, blaming my father, calling herself a victim. But her voice shook. She knew the walls were closing in. And my father, he didn't even try to deny it anymore. He was arrested again, this time, for obstruction and conspiracy. When they took him away, he didn't look back. Not at the house, not at me. But I stood at the window, watching him go, whispering. This is what silence sounds like, Dad. That night, I drove back to the cliff where they said my mother fell. The sea was calm, moonlight stretching across the water. I stood at the edge, holding her photo in my hand. For the first time in years, I spoke to her out loud. It's done, Mom. He can't hurt anyone anymore. The wind carried my words out to the horizon, soft, steady, almost like her voice. For a moment, I felt peace. Real peace. But deep down, I knew. It wasn't over yet. Because Camilla, the woman who'd started it all, was still free. And she had one more secret I hadn't uncovered. A week after my father's second arrest, everything seemed to quiet down. The media frenzy faded. Camilla disappeared from public view. And for a brief moment, I thought it was over. But peace is a liar. It never comes without a cost. I got an unexpected call from the journalist, Mark, one morning. His tone was strange, cautious. Lena. I think you need to see something. It's about your mother. Those words froze me. My mother. What about her? It's not something I can say over the phone. Just meet me at the office. My pulse quickened. For months, every secret had been about my father, his lies, his crimes, his mistress. But my mother. She'd been the victim. The one pure part of my life. Or so I thought. When I reached the office, Mark had a folder waiting on his desk. It was thick, old papers, letters, photos. He looked at me with hesitation before sliding it forward. Before your mother died, she wasn't just a housewife. She'd been working with a whistleblower network. Your father wasn't her first investigation. I frowned, confused. What do you mean? My mother wasn't a journalist. No, he said quietly, but she was helping one. Someone she trusted. Someone she met through charity work years ago. He turned one of the papers toward me. A photo, 2 women standing side by side, smiling. My mother, and Camilla Rowe. The air left my lungs. I stared at the photo, shaking my head. No. That's impossible. Camilla met my father years later. She couldn't have known my mother. Mark sighed. They were close, Lena. Very close. They started investigating your father together. Until something went wrong. I felt my knees weaken. You're saying Camilla and my mother worked together? At first, yes. But when your father found out, he turned Camilla. He offered her money, status, and she switched sides. She betrayed your mother, and helped cover it up. It was like the world tilted sideways. I could barely hear the rest of what he said, something about encrypted emails, bank transfers, deleted footage. All I could think of was my mother's face, her quiet strength, and the woman who smiled beside her. The woman who later helped destroy her. So my mother trusted her, I whispered. She trusted the one who sold her out. Mark nodded. And Camilla has been hiding ever since. But she's still out there. And she's scared. You've got her cornered. I looked at the folder one last time, then said softly. No. Not yet. But I will. That night, I went back through everything, old photos, diaries, even emails my mother had printed before she died. And in one of them, I found a message she never sent. It was addressed to Camilla. If you ever read this, I hope you remember what we stood for. I know Richard's turned you against me. But someday, the truth will surface, and when it does, I hope you still recognize yourself. Her words cut through me like glass. There was pain in them. But also forgiveness. She hadn't hated Camilla, not even at the end. I, on the other hand. I couldn't say the same. The next morning, I tracked Camilla down. She'd checked into a private clinic outside Chicago, supposedly for stress recovery. But what she was really doing was hiding from the fallout. I booked an appointment under a fake name. When I walked into the clinic's waiting room, she was sitting there, no makeup, no designer clothes, just a fragile woman with guilt in her eyes. When she saw me, her face drained of color. Lena, she whispered. You shouldn't be here. I sat down across from her. Neither should you. But here we are. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, You don't understand what your mother was about to do. She was going to expose everyone, not just your father. People far more dangerous than him. I tried to stop her. You mean you betrayed her, I said coldly. I saved her, she snapped. If I hadn't warned Richard, they would have killed her sooner. She didn't listen, Lena. She thought she could fight them alone. Her voice trembled, tears forming, but I didn't move. You still call that saving her? I said. She trusted you. Camilla covered her face, whispering. I didn't mean for her to die. But you didn't stop it, either. There was silence. Only the hum of the air conditioner filled the room. Finally, she looked up and said something I'll never forget. Your mother wasn't perfect, Lena. She made deals too. With people she shouldn't have. Maybe we both did. That's when I realized there were no clean hands in this story. Everyone had lied. Everyone had chosen survival over truth. Except me. I stood up slowly. You're right. Maybe she wasn't perfect. But she tried to make things right. And that's what you couldn't do. Camilla reached for my hand, desperate. Please, don't destroy what's left of me. I pulled my hand back. You already did that yourself. And I walked away. Outside, the sky was grey, heavy with rain. But for the first time, I didn't feel trapped beneath it. I felt powerful. In control. Because I knew what I had to do next. I leaked the full story, the original emails, the photo, everything that tied Camilla to both my parents. Within days, the news exploded again. Her name was finished. Her reputation burned. And as I watched the world turn on her, I didn't feel joy. Just closure. That night, I visited my mother's grave. No tears this time. Just peace. You were right, Mom, I whispered. The truth did surface. And now, I think I can finally let go. The wind rustled through the trees. For the first time, it didn't sound like silence. It sounded like freedom. People say revenge brings peace. But no one talks about the silence that follows it. The kind that doesn't comfort, it haunts. After I exposed Camilla, the story went viral again. Her face was everywhere. The once adored woman who destroyed 2 lives, mine and my mother's. Reporters camped outside her apartment. Old friends turned their backs. The company she ran was stripped of every deal overnight. And my father. He called me from prison. You think you've won, Lena, he said, voice calm, almost proud. You're more like me than you think. No, I whispered. I'm nothing like you. He chuckled, low and bitter. You think exposing truth makes you pure. It just makes you dangerous. Just like her. I hung up before he could finish. But his words lingered like poison. Just like her. He meant my mother. In the weeks that followed, life slowed down. I went back to my job. Moved into a small apartment outside the city, and tried to forget. But silence never forgets. It waits. Every night, I heard echoes, memories of voices, old laughter, my mother's piano. Sometimes I thought I saw her shadow in the mirror, standing behind me. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe revenge doesn't end when you get even, it ends when you accept what it turned you into. One evening, I received a package with no sender's name. Inside, there was a single USB drive and a note. She wanted you to have this, see. My chest tightened. Camilla. I plugged it into my laptop, half expecting something cruel, but what played was a video. It was my mother, sitting by her desk, talking to the camera. Lena, she began softly. If you're seeing this, it means my time is up. And you've probably learned more than I ever wanted you to. But before you hate me for the secrets I kept, I need you to know one thing. I stayed silent not out of fear, but out of love. Her voice cracked, but she smiled through it. Silence can be a weapon, yes. But it can also be protection. I didn't speak, because I wanted you to have a life untouched by my mistakes. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe my silence became your curse. I couldn't move. Tears streamed down my face. If you've reached this point, I know you've uncovered the truth about Camilla, about your father, about me. Don't let that truth consume you, Lena. Use it, but don't become it. She paused, looking away from the camera, then whispered. I know you. You have my strength, and my silence. Just don't let it destroy you the way it destroyed me. The video ended. I sat there for hours, replaying her words. For years, I thought silence meant weakness. Now I realized, it was sacrifice. She wasn't hiding because she was scared. She was hiding to protect me. And maybe I'd done the same thing in reverse. I broke the silence, thinking it would save us both, but maybe I only burned what was left. You were right, Mom, I said softly. Silence can destroy, but it can also heal. Maybe mine just needed to change shape. The wind blew through the trees, carrying a whisper, or maybe it was just in my head. Either way, I understood it now. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about understanding the pain that created it. I started writing again, not new stories, but truth. Stories of people like my mother. People silenced by fear, power, or love. Each line I wrote felt like letting go. Like giving her story, our story, a voice that no one could twist again. And maybe that's what real revenge is. Not destruction, but turning pain into purpose. Months later, Mark called me again. You did it, Lena. The full truth's out. Your mother's name is clean now. I smiled faintly. No, Mark. You did it. I just stopped being afraid. He paused, then said quietly. What will you do now? I looked out the window. The city lights shimmered like distant stars. Live, I said. But this time, on my own terms. A few days later, I got one final message. It was an email, from an unknown address. The subject line read, Some silences never end. Attached was a single photo, my mother's handwriting, scrawled across a torn notebook page. When the truth is finally heard, silence becomes strength. I don't know who sent it. Maybe it was a friend of hers. Maybe Camilla before she disappeared for good. Or maybe, just maybe, my mother had one last way of reaching me. That night, I lit a candle by the window. No more tears, no more fear. Because silence wasn't my enemy anymore. It was my inheritance. And I would carry it, not as shame, but as strength. Sometimes the loudest screams are never spoken. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying others, it's about reclaiming your voice. My silence once terrified my family. But now, it reminds the world, the truth always F.